Okay, welcome AP World History students. This is chapter 31. This is the independence in the Americas. Here we go, chapter 31, Americas in the Age of Independence. Remember, this is Canada, this is the United States of America, and both North and South America. So got quite a bit to cover here. All right, let's start off in the United States with westward expansion. We fought the Revolutionary War, we've won, we've got our independence from Great Britain, and now we are growing as a country. So Britain ended up giving us territories from the Appalachian Mountains all the way out to the Mississippi River. And then things will get much better for the United States just a few short years later in 1803, when Napoleon Bonaparte, who is quite busy battling everybody in Europe, ends up selling us what becomes known as the Louisiana Territory, the Louisiana Purchase, for $15 million. You're talking about 2-3 cents an acre. It's one of the greatest land purchases in history and doubles the size of America. It's enormously important for our growth. The great state of Arkansas is one of the 20-something odd states that will come out of the Louisiana Territory. Now, Thomas Jefferson is the president who does this, and he is a scientist himself, enlightened thinker. He commissions two guys, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, to map the territory. It takes them a couple years, but they end up basically traveling up the Mississippi River and going all the way out to Oregon. Along the way, they meet good Indians and bad Indians, and it's quite the adventure. They catalog a lot of new species that have never been seen in other parts of America. So it was a pretty interesting time. The theme here in America is west, and manifest destiny. The idea in America is it's the land of opportunity because there's land. Literally, there's land, and Europeans are coming to America because there's no land to own in Europe. All the rich people already have it all. So America is seen as a place where you can come and you can own your own land and be away from nobility. And that's very attractive to many of them. Now, of course, it's famous, and you guys have all heard about it yourself, but there's a lot of conflict with indigenous peoples, Indians, Native Americans. Native peoples resist these incursions, as you can imagine. They form alliances with each other, although these aren't very effective. And oftentimes the Indians work against themselves, much to their dismay. The U.S. Indian Removal Act by 1830, commissioned under American President Andrew Jackson, is going to drive Native Americans into what is at the time known as Indian Territory, which is Oklahoma. This is the Trail of Tears. Cherokees are one of the tribes that are forced to march. They're the most famous ones that march on the Trail of Tears. Thousands of them die en route to Oklahoma. It's winter, it's harsh weather, pretty bad conditions, and really makes people unhappy with the American government, really. Nowadays, looking back, of course, not as many people were concerned at the time. There's a lot of armed battles. The Sioux, the Comanche are some of the greatest warriors in history. The Apache are fantastic warriors, and the Sioux are tough. They just don't have the technology, and they don't have the numbers that the Americans have. And after the Civil War which ends in 1865, moving west, and it's about putting down Native peoples and basically taking everything for the white people. In 1876, the Lakota Sioux destroyed the army of Colonel George Custer at the Battle of Little Bighorn, which took place in Montana. It's a very famous battle. Basically, Custer thought he was going to be a hero. He broke off from the main army so he could get the glory. Took him and his 200-odd men to what he thought was an inferior number of Sioux Indians. And when he showed up, there were 7, 8, 9,000 of them, and they destroyed every single one of him and his men. Scalped many of them. I say 1890 is important. Wounded Knee Creek, and we'll talk in a lot more detail about these in American history. Here we're just really touching the surface of it. The theme being that you need to understand the conflict between the white government in America and Native peoples as we encroach upon their land, as manifest destiny, and we move west. But 1890 is an important date in American history because it's really the closing of the frontier. It is the last time that we'll battle it out with Indian groups. Um, and Chief Joseph famously says here at Wounded Knee Creek, he says, "From where the sun now sits, I will fight no more forever." One of the truly great lines in history. So there are several big events in America's history. The Louisiana Purchase adds a lot of territory to our growing nation, and the Mexican-American War is the next big event that's going to add a big swath of territory to us as well. We wanted what the Mexicans had. We offered to buy it. They refused, so we took it. Now, Texas is a unique history in itself because Texas they asked to be annexed into the United States of America. And the American president at the time wasn't really wanting war, wasn't an expansionist, and he declined. He said no. So Texas fights Mexico by itself and wins its independence. And so Texas is its own country for almost a decade. But they still want to be part of the United States. They know that there are a host of benefits to being part of the United States. Well, conflict will ensue between us and Mexico, and it's a very easy war for the United States of America. The date here says 1845. Reality, it's 1846, 1848. You got a 2-year war. Not very many Americans lose their lives. It's an important war because it's going to give most of the people who fought this war in America were from the South. Northerners saw the Mexican-American War as a war to expand slavery, and hence many of them would not go fight. There was no draft for it, and so Northerners didn't want any part of it. Well, this gives Southerners war experience when in 1861 America goes into the Civil War, and it's one of the advantages of the South over the North in the Civil War. So here you can see westward expansion in the United States. Here's our original stuff. 13 colonies. We beat Britain in the War of Independence. We get to the Mississippi River. Here we see the Louisiana Purchase. Again, Arkansas. All these states here will be added. Texas, its own independence for a while, will eventually be absorbed into the United States. And then we will get the Mexican cession from Mexico in the Mexican-American War. And our last little chunk up here, we'll buy that. Oregon Territory. All right. So this westward expansion, not only is it conflict with Native Americans, but the elephant in the room for the first half of American history is the issue of slavery. And so many Northerners are upset at the prospect of expanding our country if it expands the institution of slavery. So the political issue is, will slavery be allowed in new territories? And this is an issue that's going to divide the nation. Tobacco cultivation's on the decline by this time, and some of those slave owners are actually freeing their slaves because their slaves cost too much to keep up. But cotton industry is going strong, and so there's going to be a demand for new slaves. U.S. slave population rises from 500,000 in 1770 to 2 million in 1820. 1820 is a fairly important year because of the Missouri Compromise, which was an attempt to strike balance between slave and free states. And as a simple concept, I suppose. The Missouri Compromise line says so it draws this imaginary line from here all the way to the coastline. It says anything below that line coming into the United States of America will be a slave state. Anything above this line coming into America will be a free state. Now, Missouri was an exception because it was above the line, but it came in as a slave state. And we get into this idea of sister states. So like Arkansas comes in 1836, and it's balanced up here in 1837 by Michigan. They wanted to keep political balance between slave and free states. It's how bad this sectional conflict is. All right. Abraham Lincoln's election will be the final straw for the South, who have been itching and spooling for a fight anyway. So with his election, they secede from the United States. And, he hit part of his platform. He doesn't want to free the slaves in the beginning. His platform is keep slavery where it exists, but not allow slavery to expand in new territories. Of course, the problem is, as we expand as a nation, if the slave states are only able to keep the ones they have, then they're going to become outnumbered in Congress, and they will take slavery away from them sooner or later. That's how the South saw it. And so they said, no, we're done when Abraham Lincoln, who didn't even appear on the ballot in southern states, he wasn't even an option, and he won president. That made him mad, as you can imagine. So, we're going to get a war. And it's an interesting war because it's a war between lifestyles. The agrarian plantation style, southern lifestyle, which is rich, versus the emerging industrial northern economy, which is rich as well, and it's diverse. The North has the biggest economy in the world. It's bigger than Britain's economy by the time the Civil War breaks out. And Civil War will only make it stronger. Industrialization is the key. Now, in the first 2 years of the war, it really doesn't go as well for the North as it should have. The South has been fortunate. It's been stubborn. It's had a few advantages that helped keep the North, which should have just wiped them off the map, kind of keeps them from rolling over them. But in 1863, Abraham Lincoln issues a very famous document called the Emancipation Proclamation, which frees slaves in states in rebellion against the United States. There were 4 slave states that never seceded. They were called the border states. So they're allowed to keep their slaves. But slaves are helping the South in this war. And so Lincoln frees them. Now remember, the South is its own country. So whatever Lincoln says, they don't care. What frees the slaves is Union forces coming down into the South. And when they would liberate a plantation, then the slaves would be free. But the Emancipation Proclamation changes the gist of the war. The Emancipation Proclamation says that the Civil War isn't a war about restoring the Union like it was said to be in the first 2 years. It is now a war to end slavery. We'll go into much more detail, obviously, next year on Civil War in a push. All right, so, that's really America there. Let's move north, Canada. Canada is going to get its independence too, but they're going to do it without war. America had to fight for their independence. Canadians are going to be given their independence. And really your theme with Canada, there's not a whole lot of detail that we're going to go into when it talks about Canada, but themes that you should remember with Canada is British versus French culture. Remember that Canada began as a fur trading French colony, but in the French Indian War, France lost and Britain gained control of Canada. And so you have especially early on, a large French population, and now you have, the British in control of them. And they do make some concessions to that French population. They recognize the Roman Catholic Church. Remember, England is Protestant, and French law codes and stuff, Napoleonic codes and stuff. But the British population is going to swell after loyalists in the 13 colonies who don't want to fight Britain leave the 13 colonies so that they can still be in Britain's empire. They go north to Canada. So that means that you're going to have more tension between British and the French now in Canada. War of 1812 touches both on America and Canada. America is angry at some of the things that the British are doing with them out in the Atlantic Ocean. So we declare war and we invade Canada, but British forces there will push us out of Canada. And really, the War of 1812 goes pretty poorly for America. Our biggest victory actually comes after the war is over. Luckily for us, the British are busy fighting some guy you've probably heard of called Napoleon. So the social tensions between the French and English, again, that's our theme. Now, the British wish to avoid a repeat of the United States War for Independence. And so they gradually extend home rule between 1840 and 1867. All that really means is that they're gradually letting Canada run itself. They don't want to have to fight Canada, and they have a relationship with Canada already. They already saw that after the American Revolution. It didn't hurt them that America was its own country because we still traded with Britain. Britain still got rich off of its trade with America. And so they're kind of looking at that here with Canada. The Durham Report by John George Lambton. Basically, in the report, he is saying that he believes. Oh, did I freeze up? In the report, he's saying that he believes that that the British must overrun French culture. that not to give the French concessions at all, because that's just asking for a rebellion, that the British need to overwhelm the French with their British culture. Okay, I don't know why it's... Well, part of the PowerPoint is... Okay. Let's see. Let me click out of here real quick and see if I can get some of the talking points at least. I just don't want to... Okay. Maybe. Okay. All right. There we go. A lot of slides in this one. All right. So basically, they unite Canada with this British North American Act, 1867. So about the same time that the Civil War is ending in America. You get a provincial and federal governments with the Governor General as a British representative. The Dominion controls all domestic, meaning home affairs. So it's weird. So like Canada is part of the British Empire. They still recognize the monarchs of England, but they're allowed to run things at home. And then the British have a say in what Canada does abroad. So it's kind of this weird relationship. The first prime minister was John A. Macdonald. You should probably remember him. And what he does that's so great is he purchases territory, buys territory for Canada, expands it, and most importantly, he builds a trans-Canadian railroad, which will really help link this very large. Remember, Canada is the second largest country in the world, right behind Russia. But of course, it's sparsely populated because a lot of it is above the Arctic Circle. So very sparse population up here. Here are the Canadian territories here. I think today Canada has a population of about 30 odd million. So about the population of Texas, but bigger than the United States. All right, Latin America. Last time we left off Latin America, you know that there were quite a few different social classes. One of the most important ones was, of course, the Creoles, who were white people born in Latin America. So their parents were from Spain or were from Portugal, but they were born here in the New World. And so the Creole elites produced republics with constitutions. Remember, you have this American influence, this Enlightenment influence. But America had a long history of basically running itself because the British were really hands off. They let their colonies, a lot of joint stock companies and stuff, and they kind of let their colonies do their own thing as long as they, obeyed the British and paid their taxes and stuff like that. Well, the Spanish and the Portuguese were much more autocratic. They were much more hands on with the Latin American colonies. And so they didn't really, when they fought for their independence, they had no experience on how to run themselves. Now, the Creoles also limited wide participation in politics. They are elite, and they're elitist in their actions. There were significant political differences that divided Creoles. They too had conflict with indigenous peoples, especially in Argentina and Chile, where Indians, basically, right, Native Americans, people there, don't like the growing governments of the caudillos, the regional military leaders. Juan Manuel de Rosas from Argentina brutally maintains his order. Your cowboys are going to actually originate not in America, but down in Argentina and places like that. Mexico, our southern neighbor, has a pretty bloody and unstable history. After the United States, after the war with the United States, they tried to reform the government, attempting to limit the power of the military and the church, the Catholic Church. And, it's just not going to work. They suspend loan payments to foreign powers. Europeans intervene to collect their investments. So you get, France coming into Mexico because Mexico owes them money, and they fight to get their money. And so that's going to destabilize Mexico for sure. The Mexican Revolution is going to happen in 1911, from 1911 to 1920. Middle-class Mexicans, peasants, and workers joined forces to overthrow the dictator Porfirio Diaz. And then you had your revolutionary leaders, Emiliano Zapata and Pancho Villa, a famous bandit, who led masses of landless peasants. These were popular folk heroes. Pancho Villa has got a pretty mean reputation, but they're unable to take major cities. And now the Mexican Constitution in 1917 would end up addressing many of the major concerns of land redistribution. They want to see that land isn't settled in just the hands of the rich. Here's your Latin America in this time period. The Republic of Colombia, Gran Colombia. This won't stay like this, but for a while, they've got a good chunk of cheese there. All right, a little bit back in America now, 1845, right before the Mexican-American War. You get the California Gold Rush, 1845. There's also Canadian gold rushes like in the Yukon Valley. There are other, there's migrations to factories, railroad construction, plantation support services. Some people, especially Italians, migrate and return several times during these gold rushes. That's going to swell the population of America for sure. There's a lot of economic expansion in this time period, and much of it is at the hands of the British. The British are going to, use a lot of capital, money, basically, to help expand in the United States. They see many of these British at this time, these British businessmen see the United States as a great investment. So they're going to spend some money in the United States and get a return on their investment. A lot of this has to do with the railroads, massive expansion of the rail system. Remember, America is an enormous country, the third largest in the world. 31,000 miles before 1861, almost all of it in the eastern United States. But by 1900, there are 200,000 miles of rail networks, and it's coast to coast. Transcontinental Railroad happens in 1869, and it connects, and there ends up being 5 of them. It connects the United States. And it's the railroads that will actually create the time zones. America gets divided into 4 time zones to help the trains keep schedule. Even though the American government resisted the idea, the train said, we're doing it. And if you want to catch our trains, you'll get on our time. And that's how powerful the trains were. Massive expansion of the economy from 1870 to 1900. In American history, we'll talk about this as the Gilded Age. We get electricity in this time period. Trade unions gain power because the effects of the Industrial Revolution. People are wanting better conditions. Canadians are prospering as well, also due to British investments in Canada and American investments in Canada. Canada itself has a policy of economic development called the National Policy. They want to attract migrants, promote startup industries. They want to build a transportation infrastructure similar to what the United States had. And like I said, America is buying up Canadian industries. It's good for Canada, and it's good for the rich Americans who are investing in it. You see that? Latin American dependence. Not independence, but dependence. They limited foreign investment. The Latin American markets are a pretty small size. They want to exploit raw materials. Argentina makes their profits off of beef. They're still one of the largest beef producers in the world today. Limited industrializing initiatives foiled by government corruption. That's also a theme with Latin America and South America is a ton of government corruption. However, significant export-driven rise in the economy. They're finding items like beef that they can trade with the rest of the world. That gives them some prosperity. Multiculturalism in the United States. You do have a ton of cultures. We're a melting pot, of course. U.S. population is the most culturally diverse in the hemisphere, in the Western Hemisphere. Indigenous peoples were subject to formal policies of forced assimilation. They want the Native Americans to look white, sound white, dress white. They destroy the buffalo. They almost kill the buffalo off completely and get down to 1,000 buffalo. I think it's a very low number. And because, in the plains, the buffalo was so important to Native American life. America also passes the Dawes Security Act of 1887, which detracted. See, the Indians lived communally, shared land, basically. In the Dawes Security Act, they divided up and give it to the heads of the families. But what ended up happening with the Dawes Security Act was white people stole a lot of native land. Slavery is ended. Social discrimination remains. In the South, you have segregation. In the North, you still have racial tensions there as well. This period after the Civil War is called Reconstruction in the South, where the Northern Army has to occupy the South to ensure the protection of freed slaves. Once they depart, it's going to go back to slaves not having rights to vote, and it gets poured on them again until the 1960s. Most of the freed slaves work in crappy jobs called sharecropping. A lot of them end up doing pretty much what they were doing before the war, and that's farming. They won't own land. They'll work on someone else's land. They won't get paid a wage. They'll get paid with the share of the crop. And they'll always be in debt because they don't own anything. So they have to buy their shovels. They have to buy their feed. They have to buy all that stuff from former masters who charge them high interest rates, and it keeps them in debt. Also, diversity in Latin America, which has this complex social structure, and it's based on racial backgrounds. Europeans, Creoles, natives. You had African slaves. You had combinations like the mestizos and the zambos. However, there is increasing migration in the 1800s from Asia, China especially. Some conflicts between cosmopolitan cities and backward rural areas. So you have a country versus city theme there. And the symbol of rural culture is the gaucho cowboy. Kind of the hardy representation of the hardy cowboy out there on the plains of Argentina and Chile and places like that. All right, last slide. Canadian cultural contrast. This, as you can see, this chapter kind of bounces around quite a bit. Canadian cultural contrast, British and French principal founding peoples of Canada. We talked about that, France being there first. Principal social tensions between Anglophones and Francophones. British and France, a little redundant there. Also, small populations of slaves who, Underground Railroad before slaves were abolished in America. Some slaves escaped to Canada. There are freed slaves who live there. There are runaways. There are Chinese migrants. So Canada has a little bit of diversity itself. Louis Riel leads natives and Métis, these mixed race, in a rebellion in Western Canada. But he ends up getting defeated and is sent into exile. He tries one more time to rebel, and this time they just kill him. Okay. So remember the big themes here that, the Western Hemisphere is growing up. America is becoming a great power. It's expanding westward. Canada is granted its independence slowly over a course of years. Latin America also wants to push off its colonial fathers. They have less experience with self-rule than Canada and America had, so they're not going to be quite as successful, and they're going to have a lot more tensions. All of these places have social tensions. In Canada, the tension is between the British and the French. In America, the tension is between whites and Native Americans, and then whites and slaves. In Latin America, it is tensions between Creoles and mestizos and Zambos and other groups. Very racial there as well. Okay, that's your chapter here. Try to remember the themes I highlighted there, and I will see you guys in class.